All right, so here we go again, another Southern showdown. On one side, we have Georgia, home of peaches, sweet tea, Waffle House, and that one Atlanta Braves fan who won't stop talking about 1995. And in the other corner, we have Texas, home of brisket, cowboy boots, and state pride so big they had to make their own toast. Yeah, I'm talking about Texas toast. I mean, it is good. So if you're thinking about moving, retiring, or if you just want to know which state has more Chick-fil-A restaurants per capita, we're breaking it all down. Cost of living, taxes, healthcare, and which state will fry you to the crispiest consistency in the summer heat. Is crispy a consistency? I don't know. Hey everybody, my name is Tim Gibson and my channel is all about North Georgia real estate. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you are thinking about moving to the area or if you're considering listing your home in North Georgia, please reach out. My contact info is on the screen. Okay, before we get started, I just wanted to give you this disclaimer. Texas is about the size of planet Earth, so it's gonna be pretty hard to compare the entire state of Texas to the entire state of Georgia. And really, I focus on North Georgia, so we're gonna do our best to compare these two. All right, so we're gonna start with the metro Atlanta suburbs, and yes, metro Atlanta is considered North Georgia. We're looking at places like Alpharetta, Georgia, Marietta, Georgia, and on the south side, a place called Peachtree City, some of the more high-end suburbs, I guess you could say. And for those locations, somewhere in the $450 to $550 range, you can find a decent single-family home. Now, that will be a little bit on the lower end, especially in a place like Alpharetta. But if you look hard enough, you can find some of those houses at that price point. So this is a very general analysis. Of course, if you want more detailed information on any of the places that I serve or some of the places that are in this video, please let me know. I can get you more detailed info. Now we're gonna jump into some of the smaller cities in Georgia. These are places that I don't typically serve, but I do have referral partners in these cities. Talking about places like Augusta, Georgia, Macon, Georgia, and Savannah, Georgia. I guess they'd be sort of second tier population centers in Georgia. Prices are a little less expensive in these areas. Looking around $250,000 to $350,000 for a decent single family home. Now the area I serve the most, which is North Georgia, by comparison, $300,000 might get you a double wide on a half acre to an acre. So in some of the most rural counties in Georgia, you'll find houses that are around $200,000 for a decent single family home. So I'm talking about places like Osceola, Georgia, Hawkinsville, Georgia, which, you know, I've got some families from some of those locations. In extreme North Georgia, you can find places like, you know, Hiawassee, Young Harris that are somewhat similar. Then you have the Georgia coast. Yes, Georgia does have a coast in the southeast corner of the state. Savannah, Georgia, St. Simon's Island, Jekyll Island, and Sea Island, which is a really exclusive area. As you know, in any part of the country, any location that is on the water or very close to the water is going to be a good bit more expensive. So expect to pay $800,000, over $1 million, especially if you are on the water in some of those coastal locations in southeast Georgia. Okay, so like I mentioned, Texas is massive. So we are going to cover some of the metro areas in Texas. Austin, Dallas, and Houston are the ones that I'm going to pick for this video. And in that $400,000 to $600,000 range, for the most part, I would say it's going to be roughly comparable to some of the suburbs that I mentioned in Georgia. And Austin is typically a little bit more expensive in some of those nicer suburbs than places like Dallas or Houston. Now for the mid-sized cities, think places like San Antonio, El Paso. You're looking in that, you know, $300,000 to $400,000 range. And then rural Texas, which you find a lot of the, you know, ranches and farms and things like that, which would kind of compare to South Georgia. You can still theoretically find something around, you know, $200,000 to $300,000 in those areas. Obviously, a smaller house on probably a smaller piece of property. So the bottom line here is that if you want rural living and you want rural life, then you can find some inexpensive houses. And this is all relative, of course, but rural Texas and rural North Georgia and even South Georgia can compare to each other. Now, of course, location is everything in real estate. So the further you get away from population centers and amenities and healthcare and things like that, the cheaper the houses get and the cheaper the property gets. So if you see something, if you're browsing around on some place like realtor.com and you see a very inexpensive piece of property or an inexpensive house in North Georgia, is probably a good reason for it. And that's probably because it's either hanging off the side of a cliff or it's very far from anything. The definition of rural in Texas is going to be a little different than Georgia because the state is, again, so massive. So you could be in a small town in West Texas, for instance, and you could be hours and hours away from any sort of population center, where in Georgia, the most rural part of Georgia, you may still only be maybe 2 hours to 3 hours max from a population center. Okay, so let's talk about cost of living. So Georgia ranks slightly below the national average, roughly 10% below the national average for cost of living. Again, if you live close to Atlanta and you're in the metro area, if you are in the suburbs, your cost of living is probably going to be a little bit higher, especially when you compare it to places like rural North Georgia. Utilities and groceries are close to the national average. And depending on your location in Georgia, there are 4 real seasons. That's going to be Atlanta and north typically. South Georgia is very rural and very hot and very flat in the summertime. And the weather does fluctuate, but it doesn't fluctuate as much as the higher elevations in North Georgia. And I mentioned the weather because of your heating and cooling costs, which are going to be a significant portion of your power bill. A lot of places in North Georgia don't have natural gas. So what you're going to have to do is probably be on all electric for the most part in North Georgia, unless you buy your own propane. So by comparison, Texas is slightly lower than the national average in terms of cost of living. Part of the reason why Texas has experienced such a massive population growth in the past few years, especially since COVID, is due to no state income tax. Georgia does have a state income tax, but that can affect your cost of living greatly, of course. Now, the higher property taxes in Texas on average will bring your cost of living back up a little bit. And in some places like Austin, Texas, the property taxes are very high, especially when you compare them to a place like North Georgia, even some of the more expensive suburbs. And the cost of utilities can spike in Texas due to some of that extreme summer heat. And gas prices are a good bit cheaper in Texas because there is so much oil infrastructure in Texas. And from what I understand, that's going to make the gas prices in Texas almost cheaper than anywhere else in the country. And Georgia is going to be a little bit higher in terms of gas prices. And North Georgia and most of Texas, some of these locations that we mentioned are going to be very card dependent. So keep that in mind if you are comparing and contrasting the two states. Yeah, so affordability is roughly similar with the big exception of no state income tax in Texas, but they also have a little bit higher property taxes, so keep that in mind. Look, the government's going to get their money one way or the other, whether it's through property taxes or state income tax or something like that. So let's talk about property taxes real quick. The average effective property tax rate, for the entire state of Georgia is less than 1%. Obviously, that number is going to vary depending on which location you settle in. There are some really good homestead exemptions for the state of Georgia. There is a statewide standard homestead exemption. There are some additional homestead exemptions in various counties in the state of Georgia. If you are curious about what those are, give me a call or send me an email or a text and I can get you some info on that. So this is kind of a fun fact. The 2 states with the highest amount of counties are Texas and Georgia. Texas has 254 counties and Georgia is second with 159 counties. Why do I bring that up? Because the homestead exemptions are going to vary by county. And with 159 counties, there are going to be lots of different homestead exemptions available for you. So from my understanding, the state of Texas has one of the highest property tax rates in the entire country. And on average, it looks like it's just over 1.5%. Again, no state income tax is going to offset that cost some, but that can be a shock for people who are coming from different states. But those high property taxes can be a shock to some of you who are thinking about moving to Texas from a different state. Bottom line, Georgia wins on property taxes. Let's talk about medical care. Close to Atlanta, there are a lot of great hospital systems and great medical care. Places like Emory, Piedmont, Northside, and closer to some of the other larger cities, there's also good healthcare in Georgia, places like Savannah, Augusta, Macon. And this is going to be the case for any state, but rural areas in Georgia are going to have limited access to really great healthcare. Some of the best hospitals in the country are located in Texas. Houston Medical Center is world renowned. Also MD Anderson Cancer Center. Larger cities in Texas naturally are going to have better healthcare options. But because Texas is so massive, some of those rural locations, especially out in West Texas, may be hours from very good healthcare. There's also a very strong military and VA presence in terms of healthcare in the state of Texas. So the bottom line here is that both Georgia and Texas have really great healthcare, but most of the good healthcare in Georgia is centered around Atlanta. Texas has a lot more options because there are a lot more large metro areas, and the healthcare systems in places like Dallas and Houston outshine just about anywhere in the world. So Texas definitely wins in terms of healthcare. All right, let's talk about shopping for a second. All the shopping you would ever want to do can be found in and around Atlanta and out into the suburbs. Some of the coastal and mountain towns in Georgia, you're going to find a lot of local restaurants, a lot of meat and three, a lot of kind of really cool local spots. And rural locations in Georgia, North Georgia specifically, you might be 30 to 60 minutes away from really good shopping if you like to shop. But you can always go on Amazon. All right, some of the major metro areas in Texas, we're talking Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio even. Every store you could ever imagine, malls like crazy. Similar to Atlanta, but probably even a little more because you know what? Everything's bigger in Texas, right? Austin and Dallas have great dining options, great nightlife if that's your thing. Atlanta has a lot of that too. Now I've been to 49 states, every state except Alaska, and I will say the barbecue in Texas is the best in the country and way better than Georgia. Sorry, Georgia. If you're close to a city center, even within an hour, I'm going to give this a tie. You can find all the shopping and dining you want in Atlanta, and you can also find that in places like Dallas, Houston, and Austin. Outdoor activities, Georgia has a little bit of everything. You've got mountains, you got hiking, you got rivers, you got lakes, and you even have some beaches on the coast. Texas has obviously a lot of everything because it's so huge. You've got beaches, you've got desert, you've got mountains out west. You got prairie, you've got massive hunting and ranch property. So I would say this is a little bit of a tie depending on what you like. So if you want more, forest and green, then I would go with Georgia. But if you want more wide open spaces, then I would go for Texas. All right, so let's talk about the weather real quick. Georgia, for the most part, and I'm talking North Georgia for this particular section, you do have pretty much 4 seasons. South Georgia and coastal areas are going to be warmer year round, and humidity is pretty nasty in the summertime. Texas, the weather can vary dramatically because of the size of the state. Coastal areas naturally are going to be very humid and warm. West Texas is a desert, so it's dry and hot. And you can see snow sometimes in Texas, but not that often, and that's kind of similar to Georgia. And we all know that parts of Texas are in Tornado Alley, but Georgia sees its fair share of tornadoes as well. So as far as the weather goes, it's the South. Both of them are in the South. Pick your poison, right? You want some humidity, you can find that in both states. Can't find desert in Georgia, but you can in Texas. And you can find just about everything in between in terms of weather between the 2 states. I like to say that Texas is sort of a regional climate buffet, and there's some extra hot sauce added for extra flavor there. All right, final verdict. You want 4 seasons, lower property taxes, and beautiful Appalachian green mountain landscapes, then I would pick Georgia. If you want no state income tax, wide open spaces, and all the brisket you can handle, and really your choice of larger cities to live close to, or maybe if you want to live on a ranch on 1,000 acres, you can find that in Texas. Bottom line is that both are really great options. Both are great states, lots of southern charm, and both have enough mosquitoes to last a lifetime. All right, let me know what you thought about this video. Tell me if you want some more in-depth information. Of course, this is a very general video. Leave me some comments below. If you have lived in one or both of these states, I'd be interested to hear your take on what you think about Texas or Georgia. As always, my phone number is on the screen if you are considering moving to North Georgia or if you are thinking about listing your home in the area. Please reach out and we'll see you on the next video.